Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Saturday evening to you all. I hope you guys are doing well out there tonight. Had yourselves a wonderful day, and I hope everyone's been having a great weekend out there so far. Here to bring you the latest information that we have on what's going on with this tropical wave of interest. It's dubbed 98L by the National Hurricane Center, which basically means the National Hurricane Center has their eyes on it, and I certainly do too. So what we're going to do is go over what's going on with this tropical wave right now out here in the Atlantic. Its current conditions, how healthy is it? We'll speak on that. We'll go over the latest information from the National Hurricane Center as far as the latest advisory. And then we'll go over all the latest model guidance that we have from this afternoon into this evening. We'll break that down, spend some time on that. And then we'll talk about the environment out ahead of this system that does support this tropical wave to eventually strengthen into our next named storm, Ernesto, the E name. But not only a tropical storm, but a hurricane. I think this has a high probability to become our next hurricane of the hurricane season. And I also think it has a decent possibility to become a stronger hurricane too at some point. So we just got to figure that one out, okay? And then the last thing we'll talk about is steering currents. That'll be a portion of the video. We'll kind of nerd out on you guys a little bit, and we'll kind of explain why some of these model runs show it going the direction that it's going. We'll really break down the upper steering currents, and of course a huge goal of mine on this channel is explaining things to you guys as the audience where you guys can understand. So of course we'll slow it down there. We'll really just take our time and spend a lot of time on that portion of the video. Timestamps will be up throughout the entire video for you folks just to jump ahead to. So definitely take advantage of that and utilize those. If you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. It helps to get these videos out there. And more importantly, if you folks got anything that I can pray about or pray over, as always, please put those in the comments below. Let's get rocking and rolling tonight. So let's make sure this is working, and it is. So we're good to go. So this is our tropical wave right here in the middle of what we call the MDR, the main development region, or you can call it the tropical Atlantic, or you could just call it the Atlantic, whatever you want to call it, but a body of water. But this is a very healthy, very broad tropical wave. And the fact that it's so large, I think will prevent it from really developing into like a tropical storm or a hurricane or anything like that in the shorter term, like in the next couple days. Now, it does have a chance to become a depression or a named storm sometime over the next 48 hours, but I don't think this is going to rapidly intensify anytime soon or anything like that. But it's a very large wave. I mean, it's a pretty big eyesore here on the map on the entire Atlantic. So we just got to figure out where this is going to go, right? How strong is it going to get? It's popping off some pretty intense deep convection. So indicated in those reds and the blacks right in here that you're seeing, that tells us that those are some colder cloud tops, which means that we have some taller updrafts, stronger updrafts, which means this is pretty much continuously popping off some healthy convection, shower and storm activity. So that is a large look at this tropical wave in this area. We will be watching like a hawk over the next several days, probably the next 1 to 2 weeks, guys. I'm serious. I mean, we'll be talking about this one for a while, just like we were with Debbie. So we'll go on and move forward and take a closer look at this system. And this is as healthy as it looked throughout its entire life at this point. It's, the white colors, which tells us that there's a lot of moisture in the atmosphere. This is shower and storm development that's basically just continuously firing out here in the Atlantic with this wave. And if you look over here, if you're wondering what these black colors are, this is basically dry air in all levels of the atmosphere. And, there's no dry air really affecting this system that much right now. So if you look really closely, and it's going to be hard to tell, but I'm going to kind of draw some arrows and things like that on your screen. This is really taking on a structure that favors a tropical wave that's getting its act together, starting to get a little bit of a cyclonic curve to it. You can't really see it well unless you're just really a weather geek, but it is definitely taking on sort of that circulation flow, if you will, kind of that cyclonic flow that these tropical systems take in the northern hemisphere, popping off the deep convection, right here you got explosive convection right here, over here, and this is definitely starting to get that look to it. We got some nice outflow. Basically, air is getting pushed out away from the storm, mainly in this direction. So if you see kind of the moist air getting dispersed outward this way, so air is basically being pushed out away from the storm, but really from one direction, basically from east at this point to west. So not really working with I would say a super favorable upper wind pattern, but certainly a somewhat favorable upper wind pattern right now. So that's a closer look at this. Very healthy tropical wave, a lot of moisture associated with it. The latest advisory we might have a new update. We do, so cool. It just dropped about 11 minutes ago. So this is now bumped up to a 90% chance to develop in the next 7 days. So that's actually increased from 80 to 90% from the 2 p.m. update to, we pretty much can call this like the 8 p.m. update from the National Hurricane Center Eastern Time. So 90% chance to become a depression or our next named storm, which is Ernesto. And then a chance is to develop sometime in the next 48 hours, the next 2 days. It's now bumped up from a 40 to a 50% chance. You can read that discussion. It says basically a tropical depression is likely to form by the early to middle part of next week, while the system approaches and then moves near or over the Lesser Antilles, which we'll speak heavily on in this video here in a second. But now has a 50-50 shot to develop into a depression or a named storm sometime just in the next 2 days, guys. So this is starting to, this is starting to become something we really, really need to watch, especially if you live in the Caribbean islands. So let's go over the latest GFS model. We're going to initialize this for Monday evening, August the 12th. So our tropical system is right here. We're going to take this to Tuesday morning. The GFS has this going into the Lesser Antilles as a tropical storm, right smack in the middle. And I'll kind of zoom into you guys, kind of mention some islands. Hopefully I don't butcher the island names. You guys were so polite, so kind, so nice when we were, tracking Beryl. Everybody from Jamaica, the Lesser Antilles, everybody was so incredibly kind. Not to say there's no reason y'all wouldn't be, but I just, certainly, it's certainly awesome when people outside of the U.S. tune in and watch my channel. It means a lot, especially coming from some random guy in South Carolina, which I am. So, but the GFS does take a full-fledged tropical storm, a strengthening tropical storm, right into the Lesser Antilles. Now, the concerning thing is this kind of hangs out in the Caribbean. The GFS gets this fully into the Caribbean. I want to note this. The GFS called on to the more western solution before all model guidance with Debbie. Remember, most model guidance was east. GFS stuck to its guns and got it into the eastern Gulf of Mexico, and the GFS ended up being right with that in the shorter term as far as that first landfall into Florida. Now, it kind of goofed up with the secondary landfall, but that motion it took it into the Gulf of Mexico ended up being correct. But we're getting into Wednesday morning. This is developing into a hurricane at this point south of Puerto Rico. Wednesday morning, August the 14th. And then this is starting to rapidly intensify into a stronger hurricane. In fact, makes landfall Wednesday night into Thursday morning, August 14th into the 15th, as a pretty strong Category 2, maybe getting close to a Category 3 major hurricane into Hispaniola. Of course, with land interaction, the higher mountaintops of Hispaniola, the Dominican Republic, that would probably shred the core of the system a little bit, so it would probably weaken. And, then this would start to move into the Turks and Caicos Islands. One area I haven't mentioned, a little bit in the shorter term, is got to watch out for like the British Virgin Islands and you guys also. But this gets north of Hispaniola on the GFS sometime Thursday afternoon, affects the Turks and Caicos Islands. Does not take it into the Bahamas fully, but of course could bring impacts if this model output is correct. We get into Friday afternoon, and this gradually begins to strengthen again, but very slowly, I would note. On the GFS, kind of maintains a Category 2-ish hurricane or so, but you notice it begins to turn abruptly north, even moving north-northeast, and then it kind of goes from north-northeast to directly north again. So it ticks a little west, okay? And we'll take it all the way out to about next Sunday morning. So 7.5 days away, we're still talking about this like crazy. I mean, we are. We're going to be talking about this for, clear through mid-August, maybe through portions of late August, which I would consider August 20th and after. But we're going and, extend this into the eastern U.S. So you see the eastern U.S., you're starting to see Nova Scotia, Maine, the Northeast now, New Brunswick, and we keep this going. This thing obviously picks up some forward motion, begins to strengthen, could lose some tropical characteristics, has the potential to, but this is still a powerful storm system. not sub 980 millibar low at this point, racing north. And look how it tucks north-northwest a little bit. Just moving mainly due north, though. We get into next Sunday evening, 8 days from now, and this is heading and bringing a lot of impacts, I would say, if this is correct. This is bringing a lot of impacts to eastern Mass and makes a landfall into the coastal areas of Maine around August 19th. Guys, it's August 10th right now, and brings, of course, widespread impacts. Folks, I cannot say this enough. This looks exactly like what Hurricane Lee did last year. Kind of a similar setup, and I'm going to actually talk about the upper steering. Let me talk right. The upper steering current patterns is kind of similar with Lee here in a second when we get to that portion of the video. But that's the latest GFS. What about the European model? Euro takes a little bit longer to really get this together, and I don't believe the Euro in the shorter term. I think I've said this many times before, but I'm starting to really learn this a lot more as we go. The Euro really has a kind of a weaker bias with tropical systems. So, and I'm not saying I don't want this to happen. I want the worst case scenario to happen. I'm not saying I hope this happens. But if you actually look at what's going on with this system right at this moment, this is a tropical wave that's really getting sat together. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if by the time this time tomorrow night, this is a tropical depression at the rate this is going. It's just we got to see if this kind of develops a defined low-level circulation, which would mean they would dub it a tropical depression. But we go back to the Euro. This takes sort of just a tropical wave, not even really a depression, but tropical wave, tropical depression right into the Leeward Islands. Brings impact to you guys, would affect the British Virgin Islands, etc., those areas. It would bring impacts to Puerto Rico, but instead of this staying in the Eastern Caribbean, it really gets this north of Puerto Rico, brings impacts, and it's already turning. It doesn't even get it really close to the Turks and Caicos Islands or the Bahamas. It turns this abruptly north, basically stays going north, takes that northerly motion. Of course, if you don't know where Bermuda is right here. So we have about a Category 1 hurricane at this point, and it actually turns northeast and goes east of Bermuda and misses Bermuda, brings some impacts, but if you notice right here, it slows down. So it's heading northeast. You're thinking this is a clean sweep out to sea, and then it abruptly turns north right here. And that's when we will actually look at this right here. It abruptly turns north. It's way over here on your screen, right? Where's it going? Where is it going? Well, it looks like it loses that northerly motion and begins to go northeast again. And then we'll have to kind of go down here and look at southeast Canada. And here it comes up on your screen right there, and it actually escapes out to sea. So the European is a really good scenario where it impacts the islands, like the Caribbean islands early on, even brings some impacts to Bermuda. But all in all, it doesn't bring devastating impacts to anybody. So that would be our best case scenario. I would say the best case scenario doesn't bother anybody, which is a possibility. But here comes the icon, and this is the latest icon that just ran about an hour ago. It takes this system, kind of believes the Euro. It takes more of a Euro scenario. In fact, it's weaker than the Euro. It doesn't really get this tropical system together by the time it gets to the Leeward Islands. So just brings some gusty showers and storms and kind of does what the Euro does and begins to strengthen this north of Puerto Rico and pretty much takes the same route as the Euro at this point. And it develops this into a tropical storm. It takes all the way until like late next work week to develop this into a tropical storm. Now, if you keep this going, you look at the 12Z, pretty much initializes at the same spot. Takes this, deepens this into a pretty strong hurricane, and really gets this close by next Saturday evening, a week from today, a week from right now, has a major hurricane just south of Bermuda. Okay, so we take all the operational model guidance. What do we take from that? Well, your immediate take from this is, okay, Florida is saved, no hurricane for us. The Carolinas, Georgia's fine, everybody looks fine. Do not think in such a final, just in a conclusion mindset like that. If you guys haven't noticed, I'm not great with my words. My wife picks on me all the time. For you folks that probably tune in a lot, you probably catch a lot of things and probably they're so nice and just don't say anything. But I like to make up words sometimes. But I think you guys get the picture. But don't think of this as a final solution here. We're going to continuously go over all this model guides. We did the same thing with lead. This really reminds me of shades of lead. We were trying to figure out things. There would be some trends west that go back east. We got to figure this one out too, guys. So now, if we look at the European ensemble, this makes up 51 members. And we're going to look at a different way to look at this here on Tropical Tidbits because my weather nerds site is being kind of weird right now. So we're going to look at this. So I know that you can, this just looks like a yellow blob down here with some weird numbers in it. All those weird numbers that you probably barely can see on your screen, those are low pressures. So if all 51 members develop on this particular output, all 51 low pressures are going to show up, whether it's 1,006 millibar low pressure and 995, whatever it may be. But what I want you to focus in on is not really the number, but how clustered up the numbers are. So we get into Wednesday morning. If you notice, August the 14th, a lot of these are clustered kind of into the Southwest Atlantic, not really in the Caribbean. They're all kind of around Puerto Rico, points north. Now we take this to, like next Thursday evening, you notice you got some members over here, kind of off to the northeast, and we still got some members getting really close to the Turks and Caicos Islands, the Bahamas, and then everything kind of begins to split. But I will say, you're not really seeing any members really get over here. Most of the members are right into here, but there's still a spread. So if we get this back off and we continue to move forward and we look a little bit on up the road here off the coast of the eastern U.S., and I mean, I would say Bermuda's right in the line of fire of this. And then what happens, and there's a lot of people chattering in the Northeast about this, and rightfully so. I'm not saying, we should ignore our Gulf states or Southeast states, but, this does look like it's could go north at some point. It's just at what point does it? And then we continue, and, some of these members do sneak into the Northeast, but in general, it looks like a north to eventually a northeast kind of movement with these. But we expect this to change. We do, and in fact, we go back to this, we back this up, and then we look at the GEFS ensemble, which, if you don't know, this makes up 21 members, so you're not going to see as many numbers on your screen. But sure enough, some of them, there's a lot of them that are a lot further south, getting tucked into the Eastern Caribbean, and a lot of these want to strengthen pretty fast. So the general idea with the GFS and its ensemble is that it really wants to strengthen this faster, which would bring more impacts to Puerto Rico, the Leeward Islands, the British Virgin Islands, etc. And this would all obviously threaten Hispaniola too sometime midway next week. And then you keep this going, and you got, what's wild with this is you got a cluster of members that really want to get this into the Bahamas and really get close to Florida. And then you got a cluster of these members that are escaping north. It's wild. You got two different areas right into here. If we look at the run prior to this from 12Z, not a whole lot different. Except it just clusters up in two different areas more. But in general, they are kind of clustering a little bit closer up to just in the Southwest Atlantic. Well, maybe a few runs back, you had more members in the Gulf of Mexico. So same thing, you would just continue to watch this, but this has a lot more members that are kind of getting into the southeast coastline, even a couple getting into the Gulf of Mexico. So if we're kind of talking about, my idea where this could go, or not even necessarily my idea, but just kind of mentioning some island names in the shorter term. Of course, our wave is right here. It's staring you guys down, the Lesser Antilles. So if we're taking basically where this could potentially go, I would say in the shorter term, a lot of model guidance has this going right into here. So I would say if you live kind of in the first area of land that this could impact, if you live in this area right here, the Leeward Islands, I would certainly be aware of this. And, who all does that include? If you're not able to watch this and you're having to listen in, I would say, Martinique, Dominica, points north, Guadeloupe especially, and the further north you get into these Leeward Islands areas, what's wild is I literally went over all these names before I did this video, and I'm sitting here and I'm brain farting these names. Anguilla, um, Barbuda. I know you guys are probably cracking up at me. You guys get what I'm saying. These islands right into here are the ones. I'm going to have this memorized by the time we get into Monday or Tuesday, I promise you. But obviously the British Virgin Islands, the Virgin Islands need to watch this. And obviously Puerto Rico needs to also. Anguilla, I think is what it is. Antigua and Barbados. Antigua and Barbados. Okay, I'll stop. I know you guys are like, Mitch, just move on, man. You're annoying me. But anyways, we gotta watch. And, you know, guys, I try, I do, and it's funny, man. Like I said, before I start these videos, I literally I'll type in the name of one of these, and then I'll put punctuation behind it, and I'll listen like audibly to what it says, and you know, that's very important to me. I don't like to just say Lesser Antilles or Leeward Islands. I really don't. I like to mention these island names, but hopefully you're actually watching. But I mean, I would really watch out for these islands right in here, especially if something like the GFS happens, guys. I really would. So, I tell you, somebody who can spit out those Caribbean names like it ain't nothing is Levi from Tropical Tidbits, which is, by the way, one of the best people out there as far as breaking down the tropics. I've learned so much from him. But as far as the environment background out of this system, sea surface temperatures wise, I mean, as far as Celsius, of course, this is not in Fahrenheit, but 29, 30 degrees Celsius is equivalent to the mid to upper 80s in Fahrenheit. So what we'll watch here is this system is probably going to cruise over this area. Obviously, it could get into the Gulf of Mexico. I'm sorry, the Caribbean. Or it could, you know, cruise a little bit further north. But either way, in this entire area where I just drew them circles, this is sea surface temperatures 29 30 degrees Celsius, mid to upper 80s in Fahrenheit. And then whenever this turns, of course, there's going to be, you know, whether it turns up here, whatever it is, 29 to 30 degrees Celsius sea surface temperatures, very warm waters. You got to get way up here before, you know, you enter sea surface temperatures that don't really support tropical development anymore. And I do want to mention, I've mentioned this the last couple of videos, the Gulf of Mexico is heating up, guys. We don't like to see this, but you know, basically the longer we go without a tropical system getting in there, which is good, but the longer we go, the hotter it gets. So, you know, there's going to be a point, obviously, where you start to get cold fronts to the Gulf of Mexico and it cools the waters off. But, you know, that's not going to happen until we get into deep into October and November. So, you know, almost the entire Gulf of Mexico is in the upper 80s to low 90s as far as sea surface temperatures in Fahrenheit. So it's getting very warm. The Northwest Caribbean is starting to get very warm in this area. But of course, we are talking about this area right now, which is definitely warm enough to support and maintain tropical development in a strengthening tropical cyclone. So the next thing we'll talk about, if you notice I'm clearing my throat a lot, guys, I feel like I'm losing my voice a little bit, and hopefully I'm not getting sick, but I've had a little bit of a scratchy throat over the last 24 hours, so hopefully that's not a sign of me getting sick. I really hope it isn't. But anyways, back to the environment that supports intensification. This is winds in the upper levels of the atmosphere, 35, 40,000 feet up in the air, 200 millibars. So you're going to see slashes of blue, which indicates wind shear and just basically higher winds in the upper levels of the atmosphere. So you're going to see our L pop up on our screen, which is going to be future Ernesto. And what's going to happen here is this system's going to get right into here, get tucked in into the Eastern Caribbean. Okay. The environment supports strengthening already right here. And in fact, it gets right here south of Puerto Rico. Why does this strengthen at a pretty rapid pace once it gets south of Puerto Rico into the eastern Gulf of Mexico, ultimately making landfall as a pretty strong hurricane to the Dominican Republic? Well, even when I show you the European, once the system gets kind of in this general area, it's the same kind of deal, whether it's like the European and it's right here, like the European is showing, or it's down here like GFS. This entire environment starts to become very supportive for intensification of a tropical system. So we're just focusing in on the GFS, for example, right now. So we know that in the low to mid levels of the atmosphere with these tropical systems, especially a stronger one, these systems rotate, circulate cyclonically. So the winds around the system is going just like this. But what we're looking at here is winds in the upper levels of the atmosphere. So these are winds above the mid to low level circulation of this actual tropical system. So if you notice in these lines with the arrows embedded into them, this is streamlined. So these are winds, the direction the winds are going in the upper levels of the atmosphere. So if you notice, it's pushing out away from the system, then it kind of goes like this, disperses like that, goes way down here. And if you look really closely here, winds are kind of shooting out like this, they go like that. So this is working with a very favorable upper wind pattern. Basically, air is in the upper levels of the atmosphere is getting dispersed outward from any given direction, allowing for more air to rise. That gets pushed out. That allows for more air to rise, and then that gets pushed out. We know that rising air, if you don't, I guess I'm telling you, rising air allows for the firing of shower and storm development. Convection, sinking air, does the opposite. It's normally associated with a high pressure. If you're completely like right under high pressure, just dry air, things like that. So this is basically working with an environment that supports this, maintaining and even firing additional convection. So what does that do? Well, convection, shower and storm activity creates a moist atmosphere for this system. So when it creates a very compact, moist atmosphere, it creates a protection for the actual low-level circulation. So the upper wind pattern supports this. Now, one thing we will watch and we'll talk about with shear, if we had winds, see these arrows kind of pointing that way? If we had, arrows kind of pointing this way against the storm, that means we'd be working with some shear. But air is being dispersed out away from the system, and that's ultimately why from like Wednesday to Thursday of next week, the millibar drops like 20 millibars with this system and makes landfall as a pretty strong hurricane into the Dominican Republic. Not saying that's a forecast, just an output from the GFS. Now, I think the environment is pretty supportive for at least moderate strengthening out here in the Southwest Atlantic too. You got the same kind of environment. We get into late next week, about 6 to 7 days from now. Same thing, air is getting forced outward, gets a little bit weirder. It shoots down right here. It's shooting out over here. It's going just like that. So you have what we call a nice anticyclonic flow over the system, what we call a ULAC, upper level anticyclone. So I would argue that this system would strengthen more than what it's showing here. I really would. Nice, what we call divergence aloft. Don't want to use too big of terms. I know I'm not really good with big terms, especially with something I don't know. I'm just like, dude, please just tell me in a way where I can understand. But anyways, this thing gets kind of captured by a full-fledged upper low, and basically gets pinwheeled and basically slingshotted back up north. And we're about to explain that here in a second. But that is kind of the environment that does support strengthening. Now, when we do talk about steering currents, this is the part where you can really take a lot of information from, but also the portion of the video where me as the person delivering the information could slip up and explain things where you guys do not understand what I'm saying. So the blue on your map is lower pressure. The more orange, warmer colors is higher pressure. Flow around both of these features is different. Okay, we know that lower pressure, it flows cyclonically. So if you're wondering where our tropical system is here on this map, it's right here. This little blue dot that's probably very hard to see. You got to put on your bifocals to see it. So flow around, okay, this tropical system is going just like this, which doesn't mean anything on what I'm trying to explain to you guys, but just want to kind of provide an example. Now, one thing you'll see is this is high pressure. So this is low pressure. You see this area in blue that I just did a check mark? That's going to have a factor here. This is like a persistent trough up here, a trough of low pressure. And another fancy term for the area in orange is like a ridge of high pressure. So flow is going like this around this trough. Flow is going like this around this ridge. Okay, so just kind of explain. Now, this system is dealing with a little bit of ridging. Now, you got a little bit of a flow that's moving from east to west. So this is pushing our tropical system very slowly, in general, to the west. But the thing is there's not a lot of flow in this area. So our tropical system, whether strong or weak, kind of controls its own steering currents, makes its own steering currents, if you will. Now, the stronger the system is, the more it does do that. So what you'll watch for here on the GFS, which is what I'm showing you, is this tropical system begins, you'll see a deeper blue down here, right? So our tropical system begins to strengthen. As soon as it begins to really strengthen, it pulls north and gets into the Southwest Atlantic out of the Caribbean. Now, there's a point, there's a chance that this doesn't even get into the Caribbean. But as soon as it strengthens here, we know that a stronger tropical system wants to get more poleward. It wants to gain latitude. It wants to go further north. So that's exactly what it does. So there's a pretty substantial weakness in the pattern. Weakness meaning there's nothing really steering this one way or the other. This stronger system is just going to shoot north because, I mean, that's what it wants to do, and there's nothing forcing it one way or the other. It's also probably starting to feel some of the pull from this trough where the flow is going just like this, right? Right on the bottom base of this trough, that's exactly where your flow's going. Flow's going around this, like this, but, you know, that's obviously not a factor on our tropical system right here. Okay, now watch what happens here. You would think that, okay, well, if flow's going like this at the bottom of the trough, this is just going to shoot out like this and head on out to sea. And I would think that also. But watch how the pattern evolves. The pattern never just stays the same for days on end for the most part. This continues to head north. It feels it. That trough quite literally captures this tropical system. You see the connection between blue and blue here? So low pressure connects to low pressure. And at this point, this is fully cut off from this Rex block up here. So we got a ridge of high pressure up here. We got a flow going just like this around this low pressure. Remember, it wraps all the way back over here too. So it's capturing our tropical system. And this was saying, okay, I'm going to head on out here, but watch how it yanks on this system. I'll get this in motion here. It feels it, it pulls on it, and actually slingshots it back north. And that's why ultimately this makes a landfall into the northeast on the GFS. See what happens here? Remember, flow around this trough is going just like this. So it's coming down like this, and it's going like this, and then it's actually pulling around the northern and northeast base of this trough too. So this actually captures it and slings it northward. That aided with the fact that you have this ridge that sort of builds on the northeast side of this. So, you know, flow around this ridge is going just like this. So at the same time, this has a full solid northerly motion with it. So everything would point to this just getting slung directly north. All right. Now, what does the Euro show? The Euro is definitely different. Come on, get all these arrows off my screen here. The Euro is no, and here's a closer look at it. Look how it picks up. That's our tropical system, right? This is our upper low. All right. Full-fledged cutoff, slings it north, and then gets embedded into the trough. Literally, here it comes, fast motion. I mean, it's pretty crazy to watch it. Picks it up, slings it back north. It looks like it's heading back north-northeast and then goes north and then pulls it back into the northeast. Now, if you're in the southeast, you're probably wondering, what's the chances of this getting slung into the southeast? Well, a lot of things could happen to make that happen. You would need this trough to really dig down over here. Okay, say if you took this blob of blue and you put it right here, that would create maybe some steering currents to go like this. Our tropical system would inch a little bit closer and get slung into like North Carolina or something. So there's an example of a further south East Coast landfall. But if you kind of go back and look at this and you look at the Euro, we'll kind of explain what happens here. Just even though I wasn't planning to, we will. Same kind of deal in the beginning of this, right? Tropical system late next week. Right. Come on. Right here. It already feels the weakness, so it's heading north. It's feeling the flow around this trough. Okay. And we keep this going. And the trough just is, for one thing, the trough, this area of lower pressure, is cut off, fully cut off, but it's positioned further east. So, yes, this yanks on it, but that trough fully weakens. You notice that? The big blob of blue north of our tropical system sort of just weakens. So it's like, okay, well, you left me hanging. What am I going to do now? Well, I'm going to head north, but there's so much forward motion with this that at this point, this is taken off to the north and gets pretty much on the north side of this ridge. You can see how it's, sure, yeah, I mean, this ridge could push it back to the west a little bit. But at this point, this is fully kind of getting absorbed, and it's actually breaking this ridge right into here. And watch what happens here. This thing is, at this point, fully heading north. There ain't really nothing that's going to stop it, and sort of gets on top of the ridge at this point. Now, another thing we would need to watch with this is, could this trough try to capture this secondary area right in here, try to capture our system on the Euro? That would then pull it further north. So that's something we have to watch. There's a lot of things we got to watch, guys. I'm losing my voice, so that's why I'm clearing my throat so much. But that's all I got, guys. Thank y'all for tuning in. God bless all y'all, and y'all have a wonderful rest of your night.